Hey everybody, it is Professor Parrish, and we are on week 10 of English 122. So, I wanted to go over just exactly what we're doing this week. You can see here that we have Module 11 will be open as well. We're going to introduce the poetry analysis in this week, and you'll see that it's going to be due next week. And worth 100 points. So it is worth a lot, kind of like our fiction analysis, all that fun stuff. But I want to go over basically what we're doing this week. There are only 2 assignments, and then of course you can be working ahead on your analysis. You'll note that next week we don't have a quiz. Yay. So let's look at Module 10. So as far as the readings for this week, there is a section on figures of speech, which we're going to go over on pages 785 to 803. It's under our resources. And then there is a figure of speech quiz and the discussion forum 10. Now, we are going to go over as well the instructions for the poetry analysis that is due at the end of next week. So as you're going through the analysis, if you have questions, go ahead and email me this week so that I can get a hold of you and be able to let you know if there's anything you need to do, right? That's the big thing. And then as always with the poetry unit, just be looking out for poems that you really enjoy, ask questions, have a good week. It's spring. So hopefully you're able to get these assignments done by Sunday and let me know if you have any questions. So let's go ahead and look at the discussion. Of the poems from this week's reading in our textbook on figure of speech, which did you like best? And then how did figures of speech appear within that text? So I want some specific examples from the poem that you liked most and to be able to demonstrate those and talk about them with your peers, right? So it's a pretty straightforward discussion. And so far, everybody's been doing great on the discussions. I've loved everyone's responses. I've loved reading the discussions, the choices that you all have made, the examples that you've picked, how you guys collaborate with one another in your responses. They've all been really, really good. So just keep that up because we're over halfway through the semester. And as long as you just keep trucking through those, should be great. But let's go ahead and go here and talk about this figures of speech little presentation under the resources. So with figures of speech, and I'm going to zoom out here a little bit, show you guys when it decides that it wants to load up. So with figures of speech, when somebody says figuratively speaking, they're not being literal. They're being kind of metaphorical, right? They occur when a writer or a speaker departs from the literal definitions to emphasize something that's kind of more symbolic, perhaps. So when you speak literally, it means exactly what you suggest, right? And denotation kind of goes along that same line. Denotation means literal dictionary definitions. Here's how I always think of it. I think of denotation, dictionary. Connotation is connecting emotions, right? It's suggested, perhaps emotional meanings or associations rather than the actual definitions, right? So if I tell you that I'm freezing my butt off, I'm not literally freezing my butt off. It's a figurative of speech, right? It's meant to be suggested that it's really cold, but I'm not really freezing my butt off, right? Or if you're just like, I'm sweating gallons here. You're not really sweating gallons. It's all figurative, right? That's kind of the meaning behind it. So you have different ways of expressing figurative speaking. You have a simile. Simile is when you compare 2 things using like or as. I feel as if we use similes very much in our everyday speaking, especially because we incorporate the word like a lot of times. I don't like using like a lot, but I notice myself doing it and I catch myself sometimes and I'm like, just like that, right? But you could say, my love is like a red, red rose, or a dream is like a river. It's not really a red rose, not really a river, but it's similar to them, right? That's the connection and the comparison being made. Then you have a metaphor, which we hear metaphor all the time. And a metaphor is a statement that something is something else. So the 2 things are actually somewhat dissimilar. It can't literally be that thing. So you could say, love is a battlefield. Is love actually a battlefield? No. But you'll notice that love and battlefield are very different things, but yet they can be compared, right? Sort of as if saying, your love is my drug. Okay, Kesha. But you have your love is my drug. Are love and drugs the same thing? Well, you could argue that the effects are similar, right? But they're not literally the same thing. That's kind of where figures of speech come into play, right? So then you have what's called an implied metaphor, which is a comparison that uses neither a connective nor the verb to be. So you could say, I put my dream on the shelf. What does that mean? It means you're putting your dreams off for later, or you're waiting for your dream until this one other thing is solved or finished. You could say, I stuffed my feelings down. Did you really stuff your feelings down? No, but it means that you've put your feelings away for the moment until you can come back to them. That's an implied metaphor. And then you have mixed metaphors, which overlap literal and figurative meaning. And the author's intent can often be unclear with this, right? So if metaphors don't make much sense, they might be mixed, meaning the author isn't exactly sure whether they're literal or figurative. Those are kind of harder to tell, and our book gives a few examples of them, but they're definitely not as common as like a regular simile or metaphor. Then we have personification. Personification is making a non-human thing into a human. So these can be animals, places, abstract ideas, and we tend to care more about them as people, right? So oftentimes, for example, when you have like stories with animals in them, they're often personified to give them more definition and dimensions we can relate to, right? We can't exactly relate to an armadillo. Not usually, but if you give that armadillo a quirky personality, make it like introverted, yeah, some of us can relate to that. So that's kind of the idea. Like with Andy and Buzz, or with Woody and Buzz from Toy Story, they're just toys. They don't have a personality. They're just an object. But in Toy Story, they're personified to kind of give them personality and make the audience connect more with them and their story surrounding them. So that's kind of the definition behind that term. Then you have apostrophe, meaning a way of addressing someone or something that is invisible that isn't normally addressed. Now, you may see apostrophe and be like, oh, well, that's like a little thing. That's that little curvy little dash thing that's in between a word and S showing possession. This is a little bit different, but it means that something is there that is not normally addressed. So if I say like, Sandra is something, it means that Sandra possesses something. The word possess isn't there, but it is implied, in that little symbol of an apostrophe. That's kind of how apostrophe works in this sense. It's addressing something that you can't normally see. Then you have overstatement, which is often called hyperbole. I personally like saying hyperbole more than overstatement, but it means the same thing. Hyperbole is just an exaggeration that adds emphasis, right? So if something's exaggerated, it emphasizes something. So for example, the stereotype of cops eating donuts is kind of a hyperbole, and it's meant to emphasize that maybe the police aren't doing their job in that sense, right? Or that they're lazy on the job. That's kind of the emphasis around that symbolism. It may or may not be accurate, but that's the whole purpose of it. It's an overstatement, right? Then you have the exact opposite, where it's an understatement, saying it's implying more than is actually said. Meaning, I did a thing. If you say that being like a baby's born or you win the Super Bowl and you're just like, oh, something happened. It's like, no, there's way more than that, right? So for example, we have the thing here where it rained and there's just water everywhere. I would use the example, I had a friend in college that we went on Christmas break. All of our friends came back and we're like, hey, what happened? He's like, oh, nothing much. Just my wife had a kid. And we're like, wait, what? And because none of us knew, one, that he was married. And none of us knew, two, that he had a wife that was pregnant. And we're like, you can't just spring this on us. And he's like, oh yeah, I've been married for like 2 years and I'm having a kid now. It's like, wait, what? So yeah, that's kind of an understatement, most definitely, right? And then other terms from the section are metonymy is the name of a thing that's substituted for something closely related. So if you substitute something for something similar, that's metonymy. Synecdoche. I love Synecdoche. There's a movie that came out years ago called Synecdoche, New York. It's a very good movie. Has Philip Seymour Hoffman in it. It's really good if you get a chance to see it. But Synecdoche means a part of a thing that stands for the whole of it. So a part equaling the whole, right? Paradox. Paradox is a great term that we throw out very often. It's a statement that seems contradictory, but upon reflection, it makes sense. So at first you may be like, oh, this doesn't seem like it would relate. But then the more you think about it, you're like, oh, wow, it actually does mean something and connect, right? And then my favorite is pun, Words usually used for humor, like a play on words. It's a pun, right? We've seen these a lot often, and now that you ask me to think of one on the spot, it's hard to to say one. But if I say something, it's like if you're a chef and you're wanting to like make stuff for your audience, and you're like, you want to leave them hungry for more, right? Wah, wah, wah. That's kind of like sort of the saying. It's just a play on words, and our book has several examples of those. I'm sure you could come up with 1,000 better ones than the one I just said. So that's basically figures of speech, though. That's what this section of this chapter is about. And so hopefully that helps understand that segment of reading. Definitely check out that part of reading in our textbook, though, because there are some really good examples that go along with it. And then finally, we have our hints for writing a poetry analysis, which is going to be due next week. So first of all, check your MLA formatting. Usually the first thing your reader will see is how your paper is formatted, whether that's indentions, a title, whether it's double spaced, it's 12-point New Times Roman font, using headers, meaning that you have like the page numbers listed, things like that. So check your MLA formatting. If you have questions about this, you can refer to our citation presentation, or you can email me to ask as well. Choose a specific title. Should not just be a word. It should be more than just poetry analysis. It should be a summation of your main idea. And I love titles. I think they can be quirky. They can be clever. They can be straightforward. If you don't want to be funny or clever, you can just, find a fun way or an interesting way to detail what your analysis is about without just saying poetry analysis, right? Your title should be something that sparks your inspiration for writing, right? Titles are always fun. And then begin with a specific statement. Don't start with, most people don't think about a poem having a deeper meaning. Have you ever wondered about the meaning of life? Or these two pieces are alike in some ways and different in others. That's not really like, those are true statements, but they don't really hook your reader in. They're kind of cliched. They're overused. They don't really hook your reader into wanting to read your paper because they've probably seen these types of introductions 1,000 times before. Rather, tell what you'll say, not what you'll do. So tell me what you'll say, not what you'll do. So for example, similarities in tone in silos and metaphor suggest the authors have looked beyond what was immediately visible. Not, I'm going to compare silos and metaphors in terms of theme. Like that last one there is it's very basic, and I feel like you can be more creative and flowery in your language and explain more like the first example had. Include evidence from the primary text. Make sure you're citing specific facts or passages from the primary text. Include the author's name, unless you've already given it, and the page number. So for example, if I said, flower in the crannied wall, I pluck you out of the crannies, I hold you here, root and all, in my hand. Tennyson, 789. That tells me the author's last name, as well as the page number it was on. And I have my quotation marks inside before I do my in-text citation. That's how you would cite it properly, right? And you should have these throughout your paper whenever you are citing your author or citing a text. Now, give a specific analysis. Don't just say, honestly, this piece is weird. Because chances are, yeah, your poem may be weird that you look at. Don't just say that. Elaborate. Say, this Daddy stands out from many other poems because of its dark tone and subject. Don't just tell me something is weird or something is good. Show, don't tell. Explain to me how it is, right? Don't say, this poem shows people are stupid. That's not enough. Say, this poem shows people can become so engrossed in preserving their way of life, they fail to care about others, right? Because people aren't just stupid. There are reasons to why people act the way that they do, and there's meaning behind their actions. So explain that instead. Give your audience something more to think about than just very broad statements. And go beyond summarizing. Summarizing is fine. Sometimes you need to explain something and summarize it for it to make sense, but don't just stop there. Give details to make an argument. And, in most cases, your audience, in this case myself, has probably already read what you're writing about. So you want to give me something I've not thought about before, right? Challenge me as the reader to be like, I never knew that, or I didn't think of it that way. Like, I want to leave your paper being like, that was really cool and informative. And then you have your works cited page, where you'll have the poet's last name, comma, their first name, the title of the poem, the title of the book, the name of the publishing company, and then you have edited by names, years, page number, etc. So here I have Emily Dickinson. My life stood a loaded gun. And here's the tech. Here is the title of the book. Here is the editor. Here are the authors, the year, and the page number. So you can use this as a model. You can use this last part here. Obviously, the page number will be different, but this part from the year on up through the textbook, you can copy and paste that into your own works cited page. Just change the page number, the title of the poem, and the author of the poem. Everything else can stay the same, right? And so here, for example, here's like how to be my favorite and how to avoid specific pet peeves I have. So basically, this is how to really make your paper the best. Don't do absolute claims. I'm not a fan of absolute claims. Anytime a reader says always, all, every, none, or never, I question it because oftentimes those statements are absolute and can be proven wrong. So don't just say, we always think stories turn out happily. Do we always think that? What if I don't think that? Statements that are absolutes, if they are not agreed upon by your reader, will turn that reader off from your paper and they'll instantly disagree with you as a writer and it won't be good. So instead say, we often think stories will turn out happily. Don't say, that would never happen in our country. Who knows? Say, it seems unlikely that would happen in our country. Like you can say something and express your opinion, just don't use absolutes, right? People are who's, not that's. So don't say, we try to help people that need it. We try to help people who need it, right? They're who's, like Cindy Lou Who. And then end gracefully. Don't tell me what you've said. Tell me what you've said, not what you've done. So don't get tired and stop. Include a concluding paragraph. You'd be surprised how many students don't include a conclusion. And I'm like, what? The paper just ends and I feel like I've fallen off a cliff. I'm like, wait, where's the ending? So make sure you include that conclusion paragraph and try to always end on something memorable. Like your conclusion doesn't have to be really long. Doesn't have to be this big sweeping conclusion like the end of Lord of the Rings. It doesn't have to do that. But it should have a last line to leave me going, what a nice end of the book. What a nice end of the story. That was great. So always leave on a memorable last line. All right. Now, I realize I've given you all a lot to watch here in this lecture video and a lot to think about. So I just wanted to go over these 2 parts here as well as the assignments for this week. So if you have any questions, please let me know. But otherwise, I look forward to reading your discussion posts, seeing your figure of speech quiz. I look forward next week to seeing your poetry analysis, and we'll talk more about that later. But for now, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with week 11 of English 122.